A guy I know did everything right. Maxed his 401k every year for a decade, never carried credit card debt, drove a used car, brown bagged his lunch. At 45, he sat down with a retirement calculator and discovered he was still going to run out of money at 79. He'd followed every rule he was ever given, and the math still didn't work. Not because he failed the system, because the system's advice was built on assumptions that quietly stopped being true about 15 years ago, and nobody updated the manual. Here's what's actually broken. The standard retirement advice saved 10 to 15% of your income. Invest in your 401k. Retire at 65 with 25 times your annual expenses was designed around a specific set of economic conditions. Stable inflation around 2%. Bond yields that actually paid you something. Life expectancy ending conveniently around 80. Social Security as a meaningful supplement. Healthcare costs that didn't devour a third of retirement income on their own. Every single one of those assumptions has eroded, and the advice hasn't changed. Think of it like navigation. Someone handed you a map in 1995 and told you it would get you anywhere you needed to go. And for a while, it did. The roads matched the map. The distances were right. The landmarks were where they said they'd be. But over the last 20 years, they built new highways, closed old ones, renamed streets, and rezoned entire neighborhoods. The map looks the same. It still has the confident lines and the authoritative labels. But if you follow it today, you end up somewhere you didn't intend to be. That's what following 1990s retirement advice looks like in 2026. The map hasn't changed. The territory has completely shifted underneath it. Let me show you the math because this is where people's eyes open. The classic formula says if you spend $50,000 a year, you need $1.25 million to retire, 25 times expenses. The 4% rule. Withdraw 4% annually, adjust for inflation, probably won't go broke for 30 years. Based on historical data, sounds solid. Here's what breaks it. First, the 4% rule was calculated using bond yields, from an era when bonds actually generated meaningful returns. The safety of a stock bond portfolio in retirement depends heavily on the bond portion cushioning volatility. When bonds yield almost nothing, that cushioning disappears. Morningstar has quietly revised safe withdrawal rates down to 3.3% for people retiring today. That doesn't sound like much. But if the safe rate is 3.3% instead of 4%, you don't need $1.25 million. You need $1.52 million. That's an extra $270,000 you have to save. For a median income household, that's 4 more years of working. Over a rounding error in percentage points. Second problem, healthcare. The average retired couple in America spends approximately $315,000 on healthcare costs over the course of retirement, according to Fidelity's annual estimate. That number gets bigger every year, and it's not evenly distributed. It's backloaded. The years when you're oldest and most vulnerable are the years the costs spike hardest. Exactly when your portfolio is most depleted and least able to absorb shocks. Most retirement calculators treat healthcare as a line item. It's actually a compounding liability that traditional savings math dramatically underweights. You retire at 65 feeling reasonably healthy, paying maybe $600 a month in premiums and out-of-pocket costs. By 78, that number might be $2,400 a month. By 84, it could consume half your withdrawal. The slope of healthcare cost increase in retirement is steep and relentless, and almost nobody's retirement projection reflects it honestly. Third problem, longevity. People are living longer. That sounds like good news. Financially, it's terrifying if your number was built assuming you die at 82. A 65-year-old woman today has roughly a 50% chance of living past 88 and a meaningful probability of reaching 95. A couple, both 65, has better than a 50% chance that at least one of them lives past 92. That's 27 years of retirement. The 4% rule was stress tested for 30 years and barely passes. Real retirement for many people now spans 3 full decades. Every additional year of longevity is a year of spending from a portfolio that was sized for fewer years, compounded by healthcare costs that are higher in later years, compounded by the inflation that has been quietly running above the government's official numbers for the specific basket of goods retirees actually buy. Fourth problem, sequence of returns risk. This one is the quiet killer that almost nobody fully internalizes until it's too late. The order of your investment returns matters as much as the average. 2 people can have the identical average annual return over 30 years of retirement and end up in completely different financial situations depending entirely on whether the bad years came early or late. Retire into a bull market and you're probably fine. Retire into a bear market while you're pulling money out to live, and you're selling shares at depressed prices while your base shrinks, which means smaller gains when the recovery finally comes. You never fully catch up. Here's the number that makes this real. If you retire with $1 million and the market drops 25% in year 1, while you withdraw $40,000 to live, you now have $710,000. Year 2 drops another 10% before you withdraw. You're at $599,000. In 24 months, you've lost 40% of your portfolio without doing anything wrong, without panicking, without making a single bad decision, just the wrong timing. The math from there is brutal, and the probability of this happening to any specific person is not small. It's essentially a coin flip on the direction of markets in your first retirement year. You spent 35 years building something carefully, and whether it survives the first 5 years depends heavily on luck. That's the honest reality that retirement calculators with smooth average return assumptions hide from you completely. Let me bring in a comparison that makes the sequence problem visceral. Take two people. Both retire at 65 with exactly $1 million. Both experience identical average annual returns of 7% over the next 20 years. Both withdraw $45,000 a year. The only difference is the order the returns arrive. Person A gets good years early, the market up 18%, 14%, 11% in the first 3 years. Then the crash comes in years 4 and 5. Person B gets the crash first, down 22% and down 14% in years 1 and 2, then the recovery. Same average return, same withdrawal amount, same starting balance. At year 20, person A has $1.1 million. Person B has $340,000. Same inputs, completely different outcomes, entirely because of sequence. One of them got lucky with timing, one didn't, and there was nothing either of them could have done about it if their entire plan was a single portfolio with no other structure around it. Now here's where the conventional response fails. The industry's answer to all of this is save more, which is technically not wrong. More money in the account means more buffer for all these problems. But it's incomplete in a way that borders on dishonest because it treats retirement security as purely a savings volume problem when it's actually a structural resilience problem, and those require different solutions. A bigger portfolio doesn't fix sequence risk if you have no mechanism to avoid selling equities in a crash. A bigger portfolio doesn't fix healthcare cost escalation if you have no income floor to absorb it. A bigger portfolio doesn't fix longevity risk if your withdrawal strategy doesn't account for living to 94. Volume is one lever. Structure is a completely different lever. And the financial planning industry is much better at selling products related to volume, contribute more, invest more, save more than it is at helping people build structural resilience. Because structural resilience often doesn't generate fees. The cash buffer sitting in a high-yield savings account earns nobody a commission. The part-time consulting work that covers healthcare costs in bad market years doesn't have a prospectus. The spending flexibility that lets someone dial from $55,000 to $38,000 in a market crash is a behavior, not a product. Here's what structural resilience actually looks like in practice, not as an abstract concept, but as a specific set of decisions you make before you retire, not after things start going wrong. The first piece is the cash buffer, and it's non-negotiable. Before you retire, you need 1 to 3 years of living expenses sitting in something boring and immediately accessible. High-yield savings, short-term treasuries, money market. Not invested, not compounding aggressively, just sitting there being available. This is the mechanism that lets you not sell equities in a crash. Market drops 30% in year 2 of retirement. Your portfolio is temporarily devastated on paper. You spend from the cash buffer. You don't touch the stocks, you wait. You refill the buffer when the market recovers. Historically, markets recover within 2 to 4 years. The buffer buys you the time to wait. Yes, holding that much cash drags down your theoretical long-term return slightly. But the cost of not having it, being forced to sell shares at a 30% loss to buy groceries, is orders of magnitude higher. This is insurance. You pay for insurance not because you expect to use it, but because you cannot afford the consequences of not having it when you need it. The second piece is the income floor, and this is the one that changes everything psychologically, not just mathematically. If some meaningful portion of your essential expenses is covered by income that isn't correlated to your portfolio value, a market crash stops being an existential event and becomes a manageable inconvenience. Social Security is the most obvious version of this. It's inflation adjusted, guaranteed for life, and most people dramatically under-optimize it by claiming too early. Every year you delay claiming past 62 increases your benefit by roughly 7 to 8%. From 62 to 70, that's a 76% larger monthly check for life. If you need income before 70, drawing down your 401k first and letting Social Security grow is often the mathematically correct move, even though it feels backwards. Because Social Security is the closest thing most Americans have to a pension, and optimizing it should be one of the most deliberate decisions you make in the 5 years before retirement. Beyond Social Security, any income stream that doesn't depend on market performance strengthens your floor. Rental income from a property. Dividends from a portion of your portfolio allocated to income-generating assets. Part-time consulting or freelance work in your field, even just a few hours a week. The floor doesn't have to cover everything. It just has to cover enough that a bad market year doesn't immediately threaten your survival. Even if your income floor covers only rent and groceries, you've transformed your emotional and mathematical relationship to market volatility. You can wait. And waiting is the entire retirement strategy. The third piece is spending flexibility. And I want to be specific about this because I think it gets treated as a vague platitude when it actually has mathematical teeth. The difference between a retirement plan that requires exactly $55,000 per year without variation and a retirement plan with a $38,000 floor and $55,000 preferred spending is not cosmetic. It's the difference between a plan that survives almost every historical scenario and one that fails in roughly 20% of them. The person who can dial their spending down to $38,000 in a bad market year and back up to $55,000 when things recover is running a self-adjusting system. The person who needs $55,000 every year regardless is entirely at the mercy of what the market happens to do on any given year of their retirement. Building spending flexibility requires deliberate design before retirement. It means knowing your minimum viable number. Not what you'd prefer to spend, but what you could live on for 2 or 3 years if necessary, without misery, while you wait for a recovery. It means having already made peace with what that looks like. It means having pre-decided which expenses are adjustable and which aren't. The couple who has thought this through arrives at a bad market year with a plan. The couple who hasn't arrives with a crisis. Now let me address the specific lie embedded in the just save more advice, because I promised you that at the beginning and I want to deliver it precisely. The lie isn't that saving more is bad, saving more is good. The lie is the implication that there's a number you can hit that makes retirement safe in any meaningful, unconditional sense. That if you just accumulate enough, the complexity goes away and everything is fine. Because that's how retirement is sold. Hit the number, cross the finish line, you're done. But retirement is not a finish line. It's the beginning of a 25 to 30-year financial management challenge in a dynamic environment with rising costs, unpredictable markets, and a body that becomes more expensive to maintain every year. The number gets you to the starting line of that challenge. What determines whether you win is the structure you build around the number. And the structure is never discussed because it doesn't fit on a motivational graphic and it doesn't sell a product. I want to tell you about a couple who got this right because I think concrete examples land differently than abstract frameworks. They retired in 2018. Combined Social Security income of $38,000 a year, a paid-off house, a portfolio of $820,000. By the standard calculus, they were slightly underfunded. Their planner had told them they really should have $1 million to be comfortable at their spending level. But here's what they had built. The Social Security covered their fixed costs almost entirely. The house meant no rent or mortgage vulnerability. They kept 18 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account specifically designated for market downturns. The husband did 2 days a week of bookkeeping for small businesses, not because he had to, but because he enjoyed it, and it generated $18,000 a year. Their investment portfolio was for discretionary spending and travel and the occasional large expense. When the market dropped significantly in late 2018, they didn't touch the portfolio at all. Cash buffer, Social Security flowing in, side income continuing. They waited. When things recovered in 2019, they refilled the buffer and went on a trip to Portugal they'd been planning. When 2020 hit and markets crashed dramatically, same thing. No panic selling, no crisis. Just the structure absorbing the shock. They're now 6 years into retirement, and their portfolio is larger than when they started. Not because they had more money than the calculator said they needed, because the structure they built meant they never had to make the panic decisions that destroy retirement plans. Here's the part that makes the just save more advice not just incomplete, but actively misleading for a lot of people. It focuses your energy and attention on a variable that is genuinely hard to influence significantly: your savings rate. Especially later in your career when income feels maxed out and expenses feel fixed, rather than on variables that are far more within your control. Where you decide to retire matters enormously. The same $820,000 portfolio that feels tight in San Diego is genuinely comfortable in Asheville or Tucson or a dozen mid-sized cities with good healthcare and reasonable housing costs. The spending flexibility you build now, before you retire, matters more than the last $50,000 you add to the portfolio. The Social Security claiming decision you make is worth potentially $100,000 or more in lifetime income and requires no additional saving. The cash buffer that prevents panic selling in a crash protects more wealth than almost any investment optimization you'll find. None of these are in the Just Save More advice. They're all more powerful than the Just Save More advice. And they're available to people who feel stuck on the savings rate treadmill, doing everything right by conventional metrics, and still watching the retirement number feel perpetually out of reach. Let me run the full comparison one more time because I want you to leave with a concrete picture in your head, not just a collection of concepts. 2 people, both 62, both have $900,000 in retirement accounts, both plan to retire at 65. Person A is following standard advice. Hit $1 million, withdraw 4%, cross the fingers. No particular income floor beyond Social Security, which they plan to claim at 65. No cash buffer specifically designated. No concrete minimum spending number. No plan for a bad market year beyond hoping it doesn't happen early in retirement. Person B has built a structure. Social Security delayed to 68, generating $3,800 a month instead of $2,600. Part-time consulting that covers $1,200 a month and which they genuinely enjoy. 14 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account sitting outside the investment portfolio. A clear minimum spending floor of $36,000 that they've tested emotionally and know they can live on. And a preferred spending number of $58,000 they can reach for when markets are good. In a normal market environment, both of them are fine. In a bad market environment, in the first 3 years of retirement, person A is in serious trouble. Selling equities at depressed prices to cover $58,000 a year of spending because there's no other mechanism. Portfolio potentially depleted by a third before the recovery comes. Running updated projections that show money running out at 81. Stress that changes their relationship to their own retirement. Person B weathers the same bad market without selling a single equity. Cash buffer covers the gap. Consulting income continues. Social Security flows in. When the recovery comes, the portfolio is intact, not because person B saved more. Because person B built something that could survive what the market actually does, rather than what a smooth average return calculator assumes it does. That's the real retirement number, not just the dollar amount in the account. The whole structure around the account that determines whether the account survives contact with reality. Here are your specific takeaways, not generic ones, the ones that actually matter. First, run your number using 3.3%, not 4% as the safe withdrawal rate. Then add a realistic healthcare cost estimate that accounts for the actual trajectory of medical costs from 65 to 85, not a flat average. Then add a longevity buffer that accounts for a real probability of living to 90 or beyond. The number you get will be higher than what most calculators tell you. That's not pessimism, that's accuracy. And knowing the real number is the only way to make real plans. Second, build your cash buffer before you retire. 1 to 3 years of living expenses outside your investment portfolio in something boring and accessible. This is not money that's wasted. This is the mechanism that prevents you from making the single most destructive decision in retirement, selling equities in a crash. Every dollar in that buffer is protecting potentially $3 or $4 of portfolio value by preventing a panic sale. Third, optimize Social Security like the financial decision it actually is, not as a bureaucratic checkbox. If you can delay claiming to 70, you should almost certainly delay claiming to 70. The 76% larger monthly payment for life, inflation adjusted, is the best annuity available to most Americans. If you can't delay to 70, delay as long as your health and financial situation allows. The difference between claiming at 62 and claiming at 70 could be $250,000 or more in lifetime income depending on your benefit level and longevity. That's not a marginal optimization, that's a foundational decision. Fourth, design spending flexibility deliberately before you retire, not as a crisis response when things go wrong. Know your floor. Test it emotionally. Have the conversation with your partner, if you have one, about what the floor looks like and whether you can both actually live there for 2 or 3 years if necessary. The couples who navigate bad market years in retirement without crisis are the ones who had this conversation in advance. The ones who didn't have it get there and discover they have fundamentally different tolerances for lifestyle reduction, which creates a different kind of crisis on top of the financial one. The guy I mentioned at the beginning, the one who did everything right and still found the math broken at 45, went back and rebuilt his plan around these 4 things. He pushed his retirement 2 years later than originally planned, built the cash buffer, restructured his Social Security claiming strategy with a fee-only financial planner who ran the actual numbers rather than just a general rule of thumb. And he identified a 2-day-a-week consulting arrangement in his field that he genuinely looked forward to and that would cover his healthcare costs in the early retirement years. His plan now survives almost every historical scenario you can run it against, including the bad sequence scenarios that most standard projections quietly exclude. He didn't save dramatically more. He built something smarter. There's a difference between accumulating a number and building a structure. The financial planning industry is very good at helping you accumulate a number. It is much less focused on helping you build the structure, because the structure is about behavior and resilience and flexibility and a realistic relationship to uncertainty, and none of that has a ticker symbol. The advice to just save more is not wrong. It's just the map from 1995. The territory has changed, and the people who retire well in the next 20 years are going to be the ones who updated the map.